So I'm going to continue on with these with the list of the argumentative techniques, and I know that I'm giving you a lot of these right off the bat. It probably feels like you're standing in front of, as oh, just a huge amount of information just hitting you. Please just know that this is just an overview, and if you can just get down these names and a little something as to what each one is doing, that will help you as we focus on maybe 10 of these throughout the class. But I'm always open to a phone call or an email if you want. If this is interesting you and you want to talk a little bit more about this, that would be great. That would be great because I know that these things are lifelong. It has lifelong value. This is not just how to write a certain school assignment, or a certain one-off thing. This you learn how to think this way. You can see it all of a sudden. You're seeing them everywhere. So I would really advocate for you to try to get these. The other thing I want to say before I continue on is please do not feel overwhelmed in terms of what am I actually expecting for your paper. I guarantee you if you just turn in something that we've worked on that has a beginning, middle, and end that makes a pretty decent point, and meets the minimum of requirements of length and the number of sources you need to use for this college comp, research paper, you're going to make a good grade. I'll always reward authorial effort. In other words, writing is incredibly tricky. It's much more an art than a science. And who am I to say that my style has to be your style or my approach necessarily has to be your approach? Or how I would do, your topic needs to be how you would do it. Sometimes we speak as a writing teacher, as if it's easy to do and we're always meeting with success. But I fail much more than I succeed when I try to write professionally. I have run across some success, but that has come with a price, and the price makes your confidence it makes you a little tougher, but the price is there, and I can't just say that every time I try to work a topic or write something that it comes easily or it works out, and I have something at the end. There's more times than I want to admit I've crashed and burned in the middle of something and realized it's just I'm way off. I'm wrong. I can't even. I shouldn't even continue because I'm seeing now this is just isn't going to work. So it goes into the trash, And that's again. I feel like that is the price you have to pay. I mean, if you and you look across the board for performance and achievement, and I think you're going to find most people fail more than they succeed. I mean, but it's they do have a number of successes, and that's often more than the average person, but that's because the average person gives up. You know what I'm saying? Some people just, because of their situation, can't give up as easily as others. But anyway, this is not easy stuff. It's not easy to get right away. It's not easy to learn how to apply it right away. I would just say pay attention and be open to this. And maybe if one of these things you actually like, oh yeah, I see what he's saying, and then you realize, hey, I can write a paper using that. That's how you grow. Just take one and go with it. And then again down the line, you might be able to experiment with some others, or maybe for this class you might want to use a mix of two or three. One is the one you use to open the paper, and then you bring in some others where they need to be brought in. That's good too. That's good too. Well, let's continue, all right? So the next one I want to talk about is the argumentative technique of trope. Trope, okay? Now, this is a tricky one, but when it's done right, it's very poetic. It's very rewarding in a literary sense, okay? So we all have run across words that have multiple meanings. And when you realize that you can use a word to frame your approach, a word that has multiple meanings, if you realize, wow, if I use those three meanings, and if I talk about my topic through one of those meanings, and then I talk about it through the other meaning and another meaning, all revolving around that one word with its three different types of meanings, I'm going to be able to create a text. To make a text that creates interest, maintains it, rewards it. Remember, that's your job. Your job is not to get all your audience to believe in your proposition, to believe, to see things as you see things. You cannot control people that way. You can't control their perspective. You can't control their attitude towards belief. Sometimes they're going to be ornery and they're going to say, makes perfect sense to me, but I still don't care. It doesn't move me. So hopefully you don't run across a lot of people like that, but that does happen. I mean, you're not going to be able to control what your audience thinks about your paper, but you do have to be able to say, I showed that my thinking was possible. What I'm saying is possible, and I believe that I showed it's also probable, or that it is a legitimate contribution, and that's about as all that you can do. But sometimes we write things or we make things not necessarily because we're trying to persuade someone towards a point, or that sort of thing, but because we realize, if I approach it this way, I can actually write a couple pages here, a 5-page article or whatnot, essay, that is sort of pleasant to read. It's not a heavy hitter. It's not an earth changer, but and this is like music. Sometimes there are songs that are very profound and historic, and if you look at the history of music and its genres, you can find these pieces where this was sort of a game changer. I mean, this was an anthem for this era, or this really changed the way people made music. Elvis is somebody like that. I mean, he was able to bring to mainstream some of the gospel rhythms that he grew up with in Mississippi. So there are certainly that type of we have that type of history, but we also sometimes just make songs because it just sounds good, and we're not trying to make some sort of huge, we're not trying to hit a home run here. We kind of like this little song, and we make it, and we record it, and our lives are filled with those sorts of things. So trope is sort of like that. Let me give you an example. So actually, I framed my own dissertation around trope, okay, and I took the word encounter. All right, encounter. So and I took the word and I put the first 2 letters, en, in parentheses. It's because I wanted to highlight that I wanted to play around with the counter idea. So if you're sitting there looking at the idea of a counter, you're trying to keep track of things, you're trying to analyze it, you're trying to quantify it, right? But then to counter also means to respond to an attack in a defensive way with equal aggression or equal force. I guess that's the better word. So you can understand, right? There are 2 meanings. There are 2 meanings to the word counter. And then if you throw the n in front of it, the en, encounter, then you're actually saying there's actually a meeting of entities. You encounter something, then you counter it, and you counter it. You see what I'm saying? So I had a 3-fold analysis going, and it was all built around the word encounter. But now I worked with 5 different authors. Each chapter of my dissertation was on a different work, classical work, and so that's why trope works best for just a small piece. So it worked okay for me in my dissertation because it didn't, each chapter brought in new content that I could play with this trope, So, what's another word? Remember could, well, scrap. So there's a journal article I like to use in teaching called "I'm Bart Simpson. Who the hell are you?" And then it's colon identity. Oh, I forget the subtitle, but it's by Brian Ott. And if you just type in I'm Bart Simpson, who the hell are you? And then Brian Ott in the journal article, you could just find the title. You could probably find it online, just free. If not free, at least you'll get the abstract, and you'll see what I'm saying. Brian Ott wrote a book, wrote a journal called, an article called, using trope around the word scrap. Okay, so he had 3 meanings for the word scrap. One is the scrap that is a symbol on the side of society, like the word scrappy would be applied to that. But or think of someone cutting material and the scraps that fall to the floor. Okay, Um, well, you can throw those scraps away, or you can take them and make something out of them and say, I have differing values from you because I value the scraps. You threw them away, but I'm using them, right? But scrap also means to erase something completely, right? And to start anew, to start your project all over again. So when you scrap something, you basically kind of erase it and go back to base one, and reimagine something, redo something. So, he wrote a pretty good article playing with the different meanings of those words and using the different meanings as a lens to analyze something. And the virtue of these things is at the end you feel like you've been kind of reading a prose poem, or it had a lot. It's maybe a movie that had a lot of twist to it or something. It wasn't necessarily data driven, or correcting something or quantifying something. It was just an interesting analysis, an interesting take on something. Okay, so there's a book called Grassroots, and it's actually a book about medical marijuana, but it also is pointing towards how we need to legalize marijuana, and so and the idea behind this was that the only way this is going to happen if small local communities spring up and advocate for change, right? So you have grassroots being used in two different ways. One is the literal plant, the grass and its roots, and then grassroots. And that worked for a while, but halfway through the book, I realized I got your point, or even before that, right? Because once you recognize the guiding principle, right, the trope that's at play, you can skim and skip and speed read because you're not really going to miss much more. Now listen, trope is really just using a word that has a couple meanings to it to be up there in your title, to be a guiding principle as to how you're going to analyze something. All right, let's go on. Let's talk about pattern. And pattern is when you're looking at an event and you realize that given the situation, given these series of or these conditions, there's going to be a process of events that are linked, and you can predict it. The virtue of writing a pattern paper is that you're using it towards predictability. So, for example, if now someone actually did this in a book called The Psychopathy Test, my journal, my travels through the madness industry. But this person interviewed a lot of CEOs, and he recognized that the CEOs had, you know what, I might be getting my sources mixed up. I apologize for that. But let's say you were analyzing CEOs and successful CEOs, and there was a certain group of them that were quite emotionally blunt. I don't know what the word is. They were just able to, nothing affected them. They could fire people, hire them back, fire them again, cut things, and he noticed that they had a lot of affinity towards collecting statues or art of wild beasts. He noticed some other things that they all kind of shared. So there was a collection of traits that he could say, this is how you can recognize this person. So now actually I was doing profile. You see what I'm saying? That's argumentative technique of profile. But what if then you realize, okay, how does a business ever get to the point where they ever hire someone like this? First, they get into a position where they're in a, they're floundering and they've overextended. So then they have to do radical cuts, and they hire someone to come in and do those cuts. And that person then doesn't leave, even though there's a point after that. The third thing here is they try to make this person leave, but this person has negotiated a contract where this person is staying on. So maybe there are three spots here. You see, pattern is a series of events. It's not just profiling something. It's saying as this thing moves through history, in terms of temporal history, as it moves through time, there's a pattern that happens here, and you can recognize this pattern, right? And if nobody has recognized that pattern, then you have something to write about, right? You have a contribution to the field of human psychology or something like that. Okay, so pattern is very powerful if you can actually see that it's there. Now one thing, pattern is an historical approach. So you have to read a lot about companies or about people or about uh, situation, whatever it is you're focusing on. You have to really know the history of it, which is, that's a certain type of research for sure. Of course it is, but you're not necessarily out in the field, if you will, doing experiment or surveys or things like that. But you should be doing quite a bit of reading. So that's pattern. Now, if you listen to my audio clips, I'll talk more at length on each one of them. Well, maybe on 10 of these, and you'll get more examples in that. Okay. Now, here's something that doesn't seem to really be a trope, but it actually is, and I call it the trope of explanation. Okay. Now, this is where it gets a little tricky, because you might be thinking, well, I'm always explaining something. I mean, I'm explaining my idea here or my point here, so it's kind of all explanation. And I agree with you. That's a general way to kind of look at it. But when you are actually using the argumentative technique of explanation to frame your analysis, to frame the text you're making, then you are really trying to answer a why question. Why, and whatever, why most road rage incidences involve 20 to 30-year-old males? Question mark. Why do dentists charge so much for braces? I think I used this in another video, but you're presenting to the reader the guiding question, and the question is in the form of a why question, and then you are explaining it. Now, the virtue here, the virtue of this type of paper is that you've actually come up with a unique explanation. As you've gone out to try to find the answers, you realize that there was a lacuna, a gap, or that none of the answers really seem to answer sufficiently the question. That you just felt there was a better answer out there, and you actually couldn't find it, so you came up with it. And after you thought and thought and thought about it, you have an answer to articulate. It's your unique answer, and it does seem to explain it. So again, I should have maybe written down some examples, but I didn't want to get into this trap of like going on and on with one technique, although it seems like that's happening anyway. But I have noticed, I grew up with animals, and we had quite a bit of land, and these animals, oh my goodness, these dogs and cats, I mean, they would come and go. I mean, they would die, and we'd get a new one. We'd find one, we'd take one in, and they would get bit by a rattlesnake. I grew up in the Southwest, and die, or they would drown. I mean, it was an awful thing, right? But I just don't remember ever taking an animal into the vet when I was growing up and spending a lot of money on that. We would help the animal suffer through it, and if the animal passed, we would give it a decent burial, and we would get another one. That sounds callous and cruel in this day and age, and I hope I don't offend anybody, but that is how I grew up in the rural Southwest of Texas, the bottom part of Texas, the Rio Grande Valley. And what is more, many people around me that I know, my friends, my community, I know that that's how we kind of treated animals. If a vet was at play, it was because the vet was earning money through servicing cattle and farm animals. Okay, but now it seems that our culture has really moved much more towards viewing pets as family, to the point where we are spending a lot of money on them. If we have the sort of leisure money to spend, it seems like our culture is giving a big green light to doing that. And whereas now we have pet medical insurance, we have pet cemeteries, pet burial services, pet therapy, I mean, just a whole host of things, right? So I want to know why. Why do we treat our pets like children now? And that might be a really big question to answer. It might be too big. And that's part of the beauty of knowing how to pick a topic. Is like, yeah, I know that is actually an interesting question, but there's no way you're ever going to be able to really delve into this problem when you're writing a piece that's only 2,000 or 4,000 words long. Okay, you need to really narrow it and just focus on one aspect of that, pet fashion or whatever. Or, explanation could also take the form of a how question, like how does music affect us? So, every seems like every semester, every other semester, there's a student that wants to write about how music affects us emotionally, and there's another student that wants to write about what what dreams mean, how to how to find out what dreams mean. And there's just I don't really see any way a student is going to make an original contribution with that, because you're not going to be able to put in the time to really come up with anything new to say about this that hasn't already been said. So your answer to that question is just going to be a compilation of other people's half-baked answers, or answers that no one can falsify. So just about anything can go. It certainly is a fact that music affects us, but as to just understanding exactly why and how might be a fool's errand, and it might trick you into thinking that you're writing something because you're managing to produce 6 or 8 or 10 pages, but in fact you're not saying anything new, and what you're saying under close scrutiny will quickly fall apart. It's not going to provide a sufficient explanation. It doesn't have much explanatory power because your topic was so broad. Okay, so that's when a student will slide around and actually try to substitute an easier task for the task that I'm really asking them to focus on. Right. Anyway, I need to keep on moving here. So very closely connected to this, is is uh, is the argumentative technique of a question. Okay, so sometimes you do have a question that can frame your whole essay, and if you're just trying to explain that, then I would actually call that explanation, because yeah, that's how you introduce this notion of I've got a unique explanation for this, right? But when I say argumentative technique of question, I'm saying that you are sitting there at the conversation, listening to people write about your topic, and you realize that they're ignoring something that is worth. It's a question that nobody is answering, all right, but it needs to be answered. So what I'm saying here is you might not have an explanation for this, but your contribution is just to highlight and properly articulate the missing question. So your paper literally is basically, for the first part, it's going to be summary, because you need to summarize what the main views are, so that when you get to your contribution, your reader will recognize how it's a question no one is asking. Okay, really quickly, let me give you an example of this. There's a lot of stuff written on the gun control debate, right? And the notion is it's freedom, it's principle, it's we need it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's also second, it's in the Constitution of the United States. So it's our constitutional right to bear arms. Okay, but see, I have a question. He's going to say, I have a question. My question is, because I could be wrong, right? But and it is a genuine question. Isn't the notion there that we were granted that right because the framers of the Constitution wanted us to be able to overthrow an oppressive government? So they wanted us to have equal rights to weaponry. They wanted the right to weaponry to be a democratic right, a right open to all citizens, so that groups of citizens could form their own armies to overthrow an oppressive government. So really, the point there is we have the right to form an army, not necessarily to always have a handgun. We have the right to overthrow an oppressive government, which means that we have a right to fight against them, and defensively or offensively, if that's what we need to do, because they're sitting there and they're just thinking that we can't remove them. So the framers gave us the right to remove oppressive government, to effect the revolution. But in order for that to work, right, we have to have the right to equal weaponry. But at this point in age, right, at this point in Americans' development, the United States Department of Defense has stealth bomber. It's got a couple nuclear bombs, more than a couple. Has the latest, tank technology. Has the latest drone technology. Has the latest laser technology. I can go buy 20 handguns, and there's no way I'm going to be able to wage war against the government, because we have somehow allowed the weaponry of the Army of the United States to be allocated to one group that happens to be on the government side. So if we want to overthrow the government, we've got a problem. You see what I'm saying? So I want to know how come this point isn't addressed, and all this ink that is spilled, if you will, over this issue of gun control, in terms of why we need it, why it's in the Constitution, and why the Constitution is a support for us being able to have guns. Now, I'm one of the most apolitical person you're going to ever meet. I frankly don't care. You can have guns, you don't have guns. It doesn't matter to me. I'm saying I do have an interest in the notion that no one has asked this question. So I think I could write a paper saying I've got a question I haven't run across an answer to, and I want someone to explain it. So if you have that sort of question and you have the explanation, that's really powerful. If you don't have the explanation, that sort of question is still a contribution, because if no one's asking it and you think someone needs to ask it, see, that's exactly how conversations work. If you're over there talking about something, you realize there's something really important no one's asking about, because I want to know what about this. That's how it would be a contribution. All right, let's move on. So controversion. The argumentative technique of controversion is when you realize there's a common sense notion about something, and you're going to try to write about how the exact opposite is the case. Okay? The exact opposite is the case. So, I don't know if you remember this, but ex-President Trump invited the Clemson football championship team to the White House to give them food, and it turns out he just bought a ton of fast food stuff still in a wrapper, McNuggets, Big Macs, Taco Bell, and it was still wrapped up as fast food, and they placed them in the precious silverware set that they have. The tureens were shiny and brass, and the stands and the plates were beautiful, glistening, polished metalware. Maybe copper, maybe zinc, I don't know, but beautiful candles. But there were hamburgers that were still in the wrapper. And so a lot of people were like, well, that just shows you how ridiculous President Trump was. And I just recently read an argument that said that was actually brilliant. In fact, this person wrote a book about presidents and their food, how they express themselves through food. And this one part about Trump was that was not stupid at all. It was the exact opposite, because what he was telling to everybody that was watching him was that I am not a rich guy that likes to go out to spend $400 on dinner at a fancy swank place that no one feels comfortable in except the ultra rich. Although I suppose he does do that, but he'll make sure to slather his steak with ketchup, or to leave the wrappers on so people know that I'm touching base with them because they like McDonald's and I like McDonald's. That's the idea of what Trump was saying. So again, I'm not pro-Trump or not pro-Trump. Again, I'm a sideline observer. In fact, every election, I send a letter into Washington advocating a return back to the Roman consulship, where two people from opposite parties rule together. And I've yet to get a response to that, but that is my way of voting, I guess. But anyway, let's move on. Definition is simply when you realize that the conversation is using a word that is very loose, and no one has spent time to really try to explain this. I think I said earlier that AI is the question as to whether or not computers can think, right? And I would be like, you need to define think. What exactly do you mean here? And that word needs definition, right? And so if you realize that there is a key word happening in the conversation, but nobody that you're reading or watching has just really taken time out to say this is exactly what I mean with this word, then you can kind of call a timeout, if you will, of the conversation and say, hey, we need to define a term. I'm going to write a paper just trying to define it, showing you how the word we have at play doesn't really count it, doesn't really cut it, is giving a false impression, and how we need to be more specific. All right, so that's the argumentative technique of definition. Now, the last one I'm going to mention here, and I need to mention two more two more, but then and thank you for your patience because I know this video is going into the 30-minute range. But okay, so the argumentative technique of motif is when you recognize that something always seems to be popping up, and when you get that, when you see that, you can explain it. It's not necessarily a pattern. It's not necessarily a profile thing. It's just in a weird sort of way, you're realizing that something always seems to happen with something else, or it just keeps on popping up in a certain topic. For example, if you study celebrities, and especially the lives of celebrities, many of them get to the point where some of them are so exhausted with everything they have to do, they well, see, I just tipped the hat. You'll see that many of them suffer some sort of thing that causes them to have to go into hospital for a couple days, and the press release will say, will use the word exhausted. Exhausted seems to just pop up on these things, when really that's not saying anything at all. When you look in the back, when you get the full history, you're like, oh, that's why they went into the hospital or whatever, all sorts of reasons. But the word exhausted seems to be just kind of popping up. Or I'm not very tall, but if you notice that if there's a debate happening, right, a nationally televised debate, maybe during an election cycle, the smallest person on the podium, the shortest person on the podium, is going to actually start off with a joke. Okay, you see that? The joke pops up, boom, 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 and it's like, why? It's not necessarily pattern, because a pattern is a series of events. This is just a thing that keeps on popping up in this milieu, in this condition. Or take Wall Street financiers, okay? If you study the history of the major investing banks of Wall Street, you're going to find something popping up. Boom, boom. You know what it is? It's bridge, the card game bridge. I can see the title of the research paper right now. Bridge on Wall Street, whatever the corner is for the historical Wall Street and Maine, or whatever it is. Bridge on Wall Street, colon, and then and you're just saying, hey, this thing shows up a lot. Now notice how motif would naturally lead towards explanation, right? Where you try to come up with a theory of explaining that. So that's how sometimes these things work together. The last one I want to talk about is probably, a very useful one for students in the college writing 1 and 2 cycle, because it can save you from a lot of work, and that is for you to write a proposal paper. Okay, so the argumentative technique of the proposal is simply for you to do enough explaining, or to provide enough data or something, so that you can say, look, I have an idea, and it seems that it's going to hold water, and I want to just explain what I mean, and then I want to call for future research. So the proposal paper goes with the call for future research. And if you're presenting it as a contribution to the conversation, then you're basically saying, I think I've got something here, but I'm not in a position, because of time, money, or personnel, to actually do this the right way. So I'm just throwing it out there so that someone else can work on it. It's a proposal. Okay. And, I had a student that wanted to look into the fear of flying, and we came up with all sorts of explanations on this, right, that have already been written. But one that was not written was an idea we came up with together, and that was, well, our body is full of electric circuitry, and the Earth is one huge magnet, and as you move up an electrical system through a huge magnetic field, the electrons in that system are going to be jolted a certain direction all at once. I mean, they're going to all begin to want to move in a certain direction in terms of how the north and south poles of that magnetic field are aligned. And this is the simple principle behind, like, say, a generator. When you plug a little something in on your bike's wheel, and you're pedaling, and the thing charges your phone. That's just a magnet passing around a coil of copper wires, or a ball of copper, or a ball of wires passing around a magnet in the middle. That's all it is. When you get electrons moving through magnetic fields, the electrons want to move a certain way that they don't move when they're not in that field. They want to do a current thing. They want to run in a current. So, for my question is, for some people with certain types of electrical makeups, when they get shuttled through the Earth's magnetic field like that, might they have some sort of hormone be released in their mind or body, in their brain, that is the fear hormone? And I'm not saying that happens to everyone, because there are plenty of people that aren't afraid of flying. You'd have to isolate the ones that are, and then check that, right? It's just because all of us have micro mutations or differences in our body makeup. We're all generally of the same systemic organism. We got the same systems and all that running, but on a cellular level, somebody's cell might be prone to this and others not. There are all these little quirks at the molecular level that truly um, affect us. So, one medicine might not work for this person, but it works for this person, and it's just the cells are slightly different for this on this situation and this organ or whatever. So I feel like this has a chance, right? But there's no way we're going to be able to do this. I mean, come on, we have no budget, no time frame. We can't run this experiment, but we can write about it. We can write about how we would run it. We could write about why we think it needs to be run, the experiment, and we can present it as a proposal. So I would recommend that as an option. Hey, thank you so much for listening. I think I went at least 50% longer this second video, but I needed to get this done. And I hope that you do go back and listen to the individual clips, because you should get different examples. I don't know for sure, but I'll be trying to update these to add a little more, to make things better. But these are older clips, and sometimes they're just recordings of actual class discussions. So sometimes the microphone's a little off or it sounds a little distant. But just work with me on that. I think it's still profitable for you to hit play on any link I have in our regular work folders. And also, if you're really interested in this concept, I would love to talk to you to see how we can take the next step. Okay, take care.